What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Johnny McLaury. So I'm back here in the studio. I was in here last night, very quick, for about a 15-minute episode, and just wanted to finish my thoughts on the trade I was mentioning last night between Luka Doncic and obviously going to the Lakers, and then you have Anthony Davis going to the Dallas Mavericks. So I'm going to give my thoughts on that trade. A quick summary, if you didn't hear what I said yesterday. I felt like at the end of the day, the Lakers, I do think, win in the long term because you get the 25-year-old star. But at the same time, I do think the Dallas Mavericks, though, win in the short term to some degree because I think Anthony Davis and his defense is going to make that Dallas Mavericks defense even better. They have a lot of talent, obviously, defensively. P.J. Washington, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively. You add in Anthony Davis, and obviously Kyrie Irving isn't a great defensive player, but that pick and roll with Anthony Davis is going to be really special. So I think the Dallas Mavericks win this in the short term. I do find it hard to believe that Luka Doncic was not untouchable, considering how hard it is to get a young player on a deal when they're only 25 years old. And obviously he's going to get a max extension now from the Lakers. It won't be a super max that he could have gotten from Dallas, but it's tough to get a young player on your roster. It really is. That is a star in the NBA. It is. Because you need to either draft well or make a trade to go out and get a guy. Not often do guys that are big-time players, especially really young, become free agents. So Luka Doncic, at the end of the day, it would have been hard to get him in free agency, realistically, right? And so I think the Dallas Mavericks said, you know what, we don't want to really re-sign him and give him $345 million, so our best option is to trade him. And I don't think anybody would ever expect Luka to be touchable. I don't think anybody. I think everybody were expected Luka Doncic to be off limits. So I was really, really shocked by this trade. Really shocked. Because young players, especially at 25 years old, do not become available very often. Like I said, in free agency, it doesn't happen really often, and even in trades, it doesn't happen either. So I was shocked by this deal. I was shocked. But obviously there were reports that Dallas was worried about Luka's conditioning and they didn't want to give him a supermax contract extension. And then also the issues with his weight, where he got up to 270 pounds, according to reports, which would make him the seventh heaviest player in the NBA. And the reality is, in today's NBA, you got to be on your A game when it comes to nutrition and obviously being in shape. And conditioning was something Luka really didn't really want to take serious, it seems like. But in reality, the Anthony Davis situation on the Lakers side was similar. The Lakers didn't want to re-sign Anthony Davis. And obviously for different reasons. He's 31 years old, has had his injury issues. But one thing I mentioned last night is that Anthony Davis has been healthy the last two years for the most part and has kept the Lakers in a lot of games. And even though the Clippers losing last night to the Lakers made it look like the Lakers made a right move getting rid of Anthony Davis because they're winning with just LeBron and Luka isn't even in the lineup yet, I do think it'll come to a point when Luka's in the lineup, you'll see that they don't really have enough defensively and don't have enough scoring either. Besides Luka Doncic and LeBron James, which I don't really think they're a great fit together, I really don't. Besides those two guys, though, they don't really have great offensive production. I know Austin Reeves is a good player. He's really surprised me this season. But after that, there's a real fall-off to their next option. Depth-wise, defensively is an issue. Jackson Hayes is their starting center now. I do think defense is going to be an issue for them, especially in the paint. Luka obviously is a great offensive player, but there are issues with his defense. Lack of hustle, not getting back on defense because he wants to argue calls. That's going to be a problem for the Lakers. It really is. And Nico Harrison, if you look at the Mavericks side, they didn't want to re-sign Luka, and they wanted Anthony Davis before. Look at the Lakers side. They didn't want to re-sign Anthony Davis, and they said, you know what, we could go out and get our next superstar that could take over when LeBron James is gone. And now I think LeBron James is the second option on Dallas. I do. When Luke is healthy, he's going to be the number one guy, and LeBron's probably going to have to defer to him. But I still don't think they're going to be a great mix together, considering both of them need the ball in their hands. Whether or not they're dishing it or shooting it or creating space for other guys, they both need the ball in their hands. So that's going to be an issue, I think, for the Lakers. But Luka, obviously, conditioning was a worry. For Anthony Davis on the Lakers, they didn't really want to re-sign him. They worried about durability, and they also were critical of him, thinking he wasn't really a number one building block, wasn't a 1A building block. And he's 31 years old. I get that. But he still is one of the best players in the NBA. And Nico Harrison, the GM of the Dallas Mavericks, said that defense wins championships and that getting an all-NBA and all-defensive player in Anthony Davis will help them win now and in the future. And the way I feel about it is I think in the short term, the Mavericks will not be as bad as people think. People are thinking they traded Luka and now they're completely giving up. I don't think that's the case. Even though Luka's now gone, and you traded a 25-year-old, which is tough to do at times, especially considering the situation when he's a star. You really don't want to trade a young player, but especially considering how successful Luka has been in the NBA, it's tough. But if they don't want to pay Luka Doncic, it makes sense to trade him. It makes sense. And you're also landing Anthony Davis, who's still one of the best players in the NBA. Is he 6 years older than Luka? Yes. But the Mavericks defense is going to be ridiculous with P.J. Washington, Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively. So it's going to be tough to really grade this trade right now. I think a lot of people just grade trades by the look of it, and they say you traded Luka Doncic, so you immediately lost. I don't think that's necessarily the case here. I don't think the Mavericks got necessarily a bad return. Could they have gotten more draft picks? Potentially, yeah. If they went on the open market and they told every team, hey, Luka Doncic is for sale, they probably would have gotten at least 3 or 4 first-round picks. And maybe you wouldn't have gotten a player like Anthony Davis in return, but you would have gotten more draft capital. And that's not something Dallas wanted to do. They wanted something that would help them win right now. And Anthony Davis gives them a shot to win right now more than, a young 21-year-old player would or, an extra few first-round picks would. So in this trade, the Lakers got Luka Doncic, Markieff Morris, and Maxi Kleber. Dallas got Anthony Davis, Max Christie, who is a young player, and the Los Angeles Lakers first-round pick unprotected in 2029. And the Utah Jazz got Jalen Hood-Schifino and 2 second-round picks. So everyone's going to ask who won the trade. And I think it's really hard to grade a trade, especially right after it happened, and neither player has played for either team just yet. I would say that right away when I looked at this trade, I thought neither team necessarily got better right now. I don't think either team necessarily got better. Dallas obviously needed the offensive production out of Luka. They need that scoring when he's in the lineup, and that's something that they're going to miss. And then on the other side, the Lakers are going to miss Anthony Davis on defense, especially offensively as well in the paint. He's going to be a big, big loss for them. So right away, my first thought was neither team necessarily got better. I think the Lakers somewhat have a better chance of winning the NBA Finals in the future. With Luka Doncic down the line, considering he's only 25 and he's probably going to get a max extension, so they're going to keep him. And I think that was a big part of this trade was trying to get that next guy that they could build around after LeBron's gone. So maybe in the future they might have a better shot at winning this trade. But I do think right now Anthony Davis and LeBron James slightly have a better chance of winning the NBA Finals together than Luka Doncic and LeBron James will. Because I think it's going to be hard for LeBron and Luka to work together. They both need the ball. And I think LeBron's going to probably take a slight step back and let Luka lead the team offensively. But a major issue is going to be Anthony Davis, his absence in the paint. Especially when you look at Anthony Davis and the seasons he's had a fantastic last 2 years. And he's kept them in a lot of games like I already mentioned. They're going to be easy to attack in the paint without Anthony Davis. That's why I think the Dallas Mavericks obviously saw Anthony Davis' defense and they said we can get better there and he can really bring us over the top. And the Lakers now know we don't have Anthony Davis now in the paint. We probably have to go out and get another big man. That's probably something that they're going to have to do. I don't think the Lakers are necessarily better off in the short term. I don't. I think the Lakers might be better off a little bit in the long term if they can keep Luka Doncic around and if he can find a way to get his conditioning back. But I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk that Luka Doncic actually locks in and cares about his conditioning. I don't. And even though he's had a great last few seasons not caring about his conditioning, that stuff can catch up to you. And that's why I don't think this is necessarily a slam dunk for the Lakers right away. I really don't. I don't think this is a slam dunk for them. I think the Mavericks are somewhat of a better team in the short term. But for the long term, as I said, the Lakers landed a 25-year-old player, which is valuable. Even though I've always felt Luka Doncic is overrated, getting a guy at 25 years old, especially with the productions he's put up, is a win in many ways. Especially if the Lakers didn't want to re-sign Anthony Davis and you're getting Luka from him, that's a pretty good return. But then on the opposite side, the Mavericks didn't want to re-sign Luka Doncic to that contract, so they probably would have tried trading him anyways. But at the end of the day, they should have maybe listened to more offers before just trading him to the Lakers. So this is the end of the LeBron James, Anthony Davis era in Los Angeles. They did win the NBA Finals together in 2020, but they've been the 7th seed in 3 of the last 4 seasons in the West. So obviously that has been a bit of a failure the last 3 years, but they did win a ring in 2020, which is something special. And forever, you can look back at their era and say, okay, it was a success considering they won a ring. It didn't work with Russell Westbrook. That was one thing that didn't work out. That kept them behind a little bit. The big 3 with Westbrook, Davis, and James didn't really work. But they kept giving LeBron James and Anthony Davis a try to win after that, and things still didn't work out. So that's why I thought maybe they thought, hey, let's just move on from this era. Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers, said, let's just move on from this era. And winning a championship in LA makes this era a success. It does. As for the Lakers and where they stand right now, I would go out and I would think about trading LeBron James. I really would. And I know it's hard to hear that, especially considering, obviously, how historic of a player LeBron James is. If he ever got traded, I don't think anybody would ever expect that. But if you look at LeBron James and where he is right now in his career, I believe he has 2 years left on his deal, and he's 40 years old. If the Lakers don't think they can win with Luka Doncic and LeBron James, which I don't think they can with those two, maybe go out and you trade LeBron James right now and go out and get more assets that can help Luka Doncic and the Lakers in the future. So we'll see what happens, but I would lean on the Lakers trading LeBron James right now. If I'm the Lakers, I'm thinking about trading LeBron James. I really am. Give me a few draft picks, 2 first-round picks, maybe a couple pick swaps, and then add in a young player and maybe a salary filler of a player that's pretty good. And maybe you might have to add in one more pick, another pick swap, probably another unprotected first-round pick. Who knows? There's probably going to be a heavy price tag for LeBron James. But I would think about trading him because maybe that would be better for this Lakers team in the future. I don't think they win with LeBron James and Luka Doncic. I don't. So that's my thoughts on the Luka Doncic trade. Obviously, it was very unexpected. I would never expect Luka Doncic to be moved on from. I don't think any NBA fan would have. No fan in basketball, no sports fan in general would have thought Luka would get traded. But that's sports. It's a business at the end of the day. And you look at it and you say, I don't want to re-sign him. And Anthony Davis, the Mavericks, obviously favored him over Luka Doncic, and then vice versa. The Lakers thought, we don't want to re-sign Anthony Davis, and we have a chance of getting Luka Doncic. Let's go out and do it. Let's go out and get him. So those are my thoughts on the trade right there. We'll see how things work out. But I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk that the Lakers won this trade. Luka obviously is a very productive player, but like I said, I've always thought he was somewhat overrated. And then obviously defense is an issue, and conditioning is an issue. He needs to take those things more serious. He does. So we'll see how things work out there. As for the other trade that went down in the NBA over the weekend, De'Aaron Fox got traded to the San Antonio Spurs in a 3-team deal. The Kings were not confident that they'd re-sign De'Aaron Fox, so trading him makes sense. But I am surprised that Sacramento didn't get a young player in return, like Stephon Castle. I thought that would have been a must in a trade for De'Aaron Fox. I thought they would have wanted a young player in return. I don't think trading him necessarily was a bad thing. I love De'Aaron Fox, and I like the Kings because of De'Aaron. But if you weren't going to re-sign him, it made sense to move on from him. Letting him walk in free agency would have been a mess and would have held the Kings back even further. But they did get some draft capital to help rebuild, and that's obviously a good thing. And they got Zach LaVine in return as well, which DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine being back together is interesting. I don't think anybody expected that, but obviously they spent some time together in Chicago. I said about a month ago that San Antonio was a really interesting landing spot for De'Aaron Fox. With obviously the plethora of draft capital they have, all those draft picks they have, and then the salary fillers they have as well. I thought they were an interesting trading piece, a trading partner for teams. I did, because they have a lot of pieces they could move on from. And I thought De'Aaron would be a good spot in San Antonio, and vice versa. I thought they would both be good fits for each other because De'Aaron now has Victor Wembanyama to play with. And at the end of the day, San Antonio needs another guy that can score, a guy that can facilitate. And that's what De'Aaron can do for them. I know Chris Paul's there and he's facilitating right now, but Chris Paul's old. You want a point guard that you can try to build around for the future with Victor Wembanyama. And now that's a duo they're going to have for years to come. Wemby and De'Aaron Fox. But I think if you look at that San Antonio team, they obviously have some young players they could trade in a trade, which I don't think they'd want to trade Jeremy Sohan, but obviously he's a young player that teams would probably like. Stephon Castle as well. And then they have some good salary fillers. Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes. And then they obviously have some draft capital as well that they could move on from. I thought it would be Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, 3 firsts, and 2 2s to try to get De'Aaron Fox. But the Spurs got him for even less than that. Even less than that they traded him for. So I'm really excited for this duo, Wemby and Fox. Really excited to see them together. And that's something I predicted, as I said in the past. I thought they would be a good fit together. About a month ago I said that. And now obviously things worked out. He's now a San Antonio Spur. The Spurs got Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings got Zach LaVine, Sidi Sissoko, and 3 first-round picks. Charlotte's 2025 first-round pick, which I think was protected. That's going to end up being, I believe, 2 second-round picks, if I remember correctly. A 2027 Spurs first-round pick and a 2031 Minnesota Timberwolves first-round pick, along with 3 second-round picks, a 2025 second-round pick from Chicago, a 2028 second-round pick from Denver, and the Kings got their 2028 second-round pick back. And the Bulls got Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 first-round pick back from the San Antonio Spurs. So overall, I don't think this is necessarily a bad trade for any of these teams. I think the Bulls probably could have gotten more in return. for Zach LaVine, I thought, than just, Trey Jones, Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter in a first-round pick. So I would say they were a loss in this trade, in my opinion. I thought maybe they could get another first-round pick for him, or maybe another young player for Zach LaVine, considering he's had a great season, but I know the injury history is definitely a worry. As for the Kings, getting back what they got, 3 firsts, 3 seconds, that's not a bad trade. You also got Zach LaVine in return, and maybe you could flip him at some point. If he finishes the year really well, maybe this summer you could flip Zach LaVine. And I could see that happening, since I don't think they're going to keep DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine together again, like they were in Chicago. I think one of those guys would be moved on for him sometime this summer. As for the Spurs, they win this trade. You get De'Aaron Fox, and you only need to give up. You had to give draft picks, which I know that's tough, but you didn't have to give up Stephon Castle. You didn't have to give up Jeremy Sohan. You didn't have to give up Devin Vassell. So you didn't have to give up many of those pieces that people would have thought you've had to move on from. And you also keep some salary fillers as well. Keldon Johnson's had a good year. You could have moved him. You didn't. So it's interesting. I think the Kings win this trade. I actually don't mind. I think the Spurs win this trade, but I don't mind what the Kings got in return. I think they're somewhat winning in this trade as well. But I do think they maybe could have gotten more first-round picks for De'Aaron Fox. But you got Zach LaVine in return, who's a great player. And you weren't going to re-sign De'Aaron, probably, it seems like. Seems like they were on opposite ends of the spectrum of the negotiation process. So trading him makes sense. And you don't want him to walk for free. And the Bulls, obviously, they traded LaVine, and that was a big saga for the last 3 months. Are they going to trade Zach LaVine, or are they going to not? And LaVine's had a very productive season. But I thought you could have maybe gotten more in return from him. So I'm not really in love with what the Bulls got back in return. Now I'm going to move on and talk about Jimmy Butler. Where is Jimmy Butler going to end up? It's inevitable that Jimmy Butler gets traded. It's inevitable that he is traded. He's trying to force his way out of Miami, just like he forced his way out of Chicago and Minnesota. And I'm a big fan of Jimmy Butler. I really am. But I think the way he's going about it is a worry and an issue right now. Especially with the way he's played over the last season. In January, he only averaged 11 points per game in 5 games played. And he got suspended 2 times. And then got a 3rd suspension. So that's definitely a worry. On December 26th, Pat Riley said he would not trade Jimmy Butler. Then Butler requested a trade on January 2nd. Then after that, he got suspended for 7 games on January 3rd. Following that, Jimmy Butler returned to play on January 17th. And then he was suspended again on January 22nd for 2 games this time, before being suspended indefinitely on January 27th. So it's been a big, big mess. He's been late to practices. He's been late to plane, flights. He's been late to showing up to games, it seems like. He's been really trying to force his way out of here. He really is. And obviously, I think he's going to get his way, because I think Miami knows he's a distraction. And if they can go out and trade him and try to get something in return, I think they're going to go out and do that. But they're not going to get as much in return, considering the headache he's caused. And that's a problem. I love Jimmy Butler, but I do think what he's been doing to get his way out of Miami isn't the best way to go about it. And I understand he's frustrated Miami didn't go out and add more pieces around him the last few seasons, and they just expected him to carry them to the NBA Finals like he did 2 times over his Heat tenure. But I do think it's a little bit tough to go about it this way, because not only are you lowering the return that Miami can get back, which I don't think Jimmy necessarily cares about, but you're also limiting the amount of teams that would want you when you're building up a big fuss like this. So we'll see how things work out, but I do think Jimmy Butler is traded, especially considering everything he's done over the last 3 weeks to try to get traded. He's going to get his way at some point. So we'll see what happens with Jimmy Butler. I'm confident he's going to get traded at some point. And now I'm going to break down some trade proposals that I've made over the last day. Just before the trade deadline, which the trade deadline is tomorrow at 3 p.m., Thursday, February 6th. And it'll be interesting to see how things break down in the NBA over the next few days. Or not even next few days. I guess next 24 hours just about at this point. It's 2:58 here on a Thursday afternoon. So we're looking at about 24 hours before the NBA trade deadline. So here are some trades that I made over the last day. First one being between the Sacramento Kings and Los Angeles Clippers. And I know I'm going to be off with some of these guys and the trade values. I did this just for fun. Kind of made each trade within a few minutes, with thinking, how can we make the money work? And then also, how can we make some of these players fit on certain teams? What teams do they look good on? What teams need that type of player? That's what I try to put in when I was looking at players to try to trade. So we'll see how things work out. I don't know if necessarily all of these trade values are going to be what guys are valued at, but I did this for fun. And I do apologize. It is Wednesday, February 5th. Tomorrow, Thursday, February 6th, is when the trade deadline is. So we're about 24 hours away. So we'll start off with the Kings and the Clippers. The Kings get Bones Hyland, who could be their starting point guard. Right now it's Malik Monk, but I think Bones Hyland could be their starting point guard. If not starting point guard, one of the first guys off the bench. They would also get Patty Mills in this trade, Terrence Mann, and 2 second-round picks. The Clippers in return would get DeMar DeRozan, who's on not a bad deal right now. $23 million a year for 3 seasons just about, which 2 more years after this year's over. That's not a bad deal. 3 years, $74 million. The Clippers lineup would be James Harden, Norman Powell, DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard, and Ivica Zubac. I think the Clippers are in a tough spot right now because if you look at them, they're a playoff team, and I think they're good enough to win a series, but they're not good enough right now to win more than 1 series. They need more ammunition on offense, but they don't really have enough to go out and make a big-time trade. Trading Mo Bamba and P.J. Tucker for Drew Eubanks did get the Clippers below the luxury tax by $4 million, so that does give them some flexibility below the first apron, and it gives them the chance to maybe get guys in the buyout market. They also created a $6.5 million trade exception and a $2.1 million trade exception. So those are a couple assets they added by trading Mo Bamba and P.J. Tucker. And honestly, I was sad to see P.J. Tucker go, but he didn't play at all this season, wasn't with the team at all, so it was expected he would be gone. But I got my way when I wanted the Clippers to trade for James Harden. I wanted P.J. Tucker because I thought he was a dog. He also always played hard, and that's the case. P.J. Tucker gave it his all. Whenever he was on the floor for the Clippers, he gave his all no matter the situation. But I think if you look at this Clippers team right now, they need more offense. And I think DeMar DeRozan is one of the most underrated players in the NBA still, and he's not on a bad contract. 3 years, $74 million. I would like to see the Clippers go out and get DeMar DeRozan. Next up is the Lakers and the Rockets. The Rockets would get LeBron James and Jared Vanderbilt, and the Lakers would get Fred VanVleet, Jabari Smith Jr., 2 unprotected first-round picks, and a protected 2030 top 10 pick from the Houston Rockets. So a protected top 10 pick in 2030 from Houston, alongside 2 unprotected firsts, Fred VanVleet and Jabari Smith Jr. Jabari Smith Jr. would be a young player they could potentially build around, was a former top pick of the Houston Rockets, and the Rockets would go out and get another piece to add to that really, really talented lineup next to Jalen Green, next to Amen Thompson, and next to their big man in the paint, Alperen Sengun. So they got a really good team, Houston. And I think it would make sense for the Lakers to go and trade LeBron James. I really do think it makes sense. You'd go out, you'd get Jabari Smith Jr., maybe another young player to build around, and then also get 3 draft picks as well. And then Fred VanVleet, who's still a good scorer, and maybe you could flip him again at some point. Maybe LeBron would be worth more than this. There probably is a chance he is. But that's just a trade proposal I came up with today, just for fun. Next up, we got the Miami Heat and the 76ers. The Heat would get Paul George, Ricky Council IV, a 2026 first-round pick that's top 10 protected, and a 2027 second-round pick. The 76ers would get Jimmy Butler, who was already a successful player next to Joel Embiid in Philadelphia at one point, and they'd also get Pelle Larsson. He would basically just be in there as a throw-in to make the money work. But I think it'd be interesting. If the Miami Heat do want to trade Jimmy Butler, which I do think they want to, going out and getting Paul George would somewhat be a win for them. Because if Jimmy Butler wants to be gone and you're getting basically a really good player in return like Paul George, who's had an underwhelming season, but he's still a very good player, I think it would be a good return for them. Both players are old. Paul George and Jimmy Butler are getting up there in age. And obviously, they're still good players, but then they might not be the players they once were. But the 76ers would get out of the Paul George contract a little bit easier, considering Butler only has 1 more year left after this deal's over. After the season's over, he has 1 more year left on his deal. And then the Heat would be getting a guy in Paul George who has 3 years left after the season's over, and obviously they worry about trying to keep Jimmy Butler around, so you're getting some value back in return. So we'll see if that trade happens. Probably unlikely. Just made that for fun. And then I got the Nuggets and the Heat. Jimmy Butler would go to the Nuggets alongside Pelle Larsson, and the Heat would get Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, Dario Saric, and a 2028 first-round pick swap. That's an interesting trade. The Nuggets would get Jimmy Butler, who's a very good defensive player, and obviously can carry a team in the playoffs. But then they're giving up a 26-year-old player in Michael Porter Jr., who's been good for them this season. And they're also giving up Zeke Naji, another young player that they have. And then also a 2028 first-round pick swap, which who knows what that team's going to look like in 2028, but they'd still have Nikola Jokic and probably still have some good players around him as well. So you don't expect Miami to even probably use that pick swap, considering Miami's probably not going to be, better than the Nuggets are in 2028. So that draft pick obviously is going to be something that Miami probably, won't end up even needing. Next up, we get the Memphis Grizzlies and the Miami Heat. The Grizzlies would get Jimmy Butler, Kevin Love, and Alec Burks. And the Heat would get Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, and a 2025 first-round pick. I think this trade's interesting. Jimmy Butler doesn't want to go to Memphis, but I think Memphis would be a good landing spot for him. They got a good young core, some good talent there that they could build around. Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, G.G. Jackson. And the Heat would get Desmond Bane in return, who's a good scorer. Marcus Smart, maybe help them out defensively. And then also a 2025 first-round pick, which right now Jimmy Butler's lowering his trade value right now as we speak. So the Heat would probably be happy with this deal, I think. The Lakers and the Bulls, another trade I made. Nikola Vucevic going to the Lakers, which would help them out in the paint. I think they definitely need a paint presence offensively and defensively, which Vucevic would be able to do that for them. I think he's a very good player, and he's only on a 2-year, $20 million deal is left on his contract. So not bad value. 2 years, basically $40 million left, $20 million per year, and this season's almost over. So it's only one more year, $20 million. And the Bulls would get Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, and a 2025 second-round pick. And that would basically signal the Bulls are rebuilding, which I do think that's the case, especially when you trade Zach LaVine and don't get as much back in return as you probably thought you could have. I think they're rebuilding. They're going to trade Vucevic at some point. Next up, I have the Bulls and the Knicks. Vucevic going to the Knicks, which I do think he could be very good for them in the paint, and they do have some guys that could go out and trade to try to get Vucevic. In this trade, the Bulls would get Mitchell Robinson and Precious Achiuwa and 3 second-round picks. And then the Knicks would get Nikola Vucevic, which would be an interesting return. Vucevic is still a good offensive player, and I think the Knicks right now, with this lineup they have enough to make a run in the East. And I think if you add a guy like Vucevic, who's a dynamic player and obviously can score very well and is good defensively, which he has his games, I guess, defensively, but he's still good defensively, I think that would be an interesting landing spot for him. So we'll see. Do the Knicks go out and get Vucevic? Probably not, but that's a trade I made for fun. Next up, I have the Warriors and the Bulls. This time, Vucevic would be going to the Warriors. The Bulls would be getting Gary Payton II, Kyle Anderson, Lindy Waters III, and a 2025 first-round pick, which I know Quinton Post has been playing well for Golden State, but I do think Vucevic is a big upgrade over Post. I think he's an upgrade. That's why I think the Warriors would think about making this trade. Right now, if the Warriors are trying to win, Quinton Post has been good for them, don't get me wrong. But Vucevic is a clear upgrade for win right now. The win right now situation, if they're trying to win right now with Steph and try to make one more run with this core, they would have to do it and probably go out and get, another piece alongside Steph Curry. And maybe Vucevic could be that extra piece. And in this trade, they are giving up a first-round pick, and maybe that's all the Bulls would probably get in a trade. They might not even get that much in return for Vucevic, considering he only has 1 year left on his deal, getting a little bit older. And I don't know how many teams are going to go out and try to trade for him. So we'll see. I think Vucevic is a very good player, but it doesn't seem like he has crazy trade demand right now. At least according to the reports, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of teams that are interested in shopping for him. Next up, I have the Heat and the Warriors. I have Jimmy Butler going to the Warriors, and I have the Heat getting Andrew Wiggins, Dennis Schroeder, Gary Payton II, Lindy Waters III, a 2025 first, and a 2025 second-round pick. In this trade, the Warriors are getting Jimmy Butler, and there were reports that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr don't think he'd fit with their locker room, considering all the headaches Jimmy's caused in Miami. It makes sense. They probably don't go out and trade for him. But this is a trade that the money would work, and I think he'd fit next to Steph Curry and the guys they have in this offense. And then the Heat would get Andrew Wiggins, who's still very good, has had a good season. And then also get some draft picks back in return. Dennis Schroeder, Gary Payton II. They'd probably try to go flip those guys realistically, maybe. Maybe they'd keep Wiggins and probably keep Schroeder maybe, and maybe try to trade Terry Rozier or some one of their guys in their lineup. Since they have a lot of guards in Miami, it makes sense for them to try to trade, either Dennis Schroeder or Gary Payton II. Next up, we have the Clippers and the Blazers. The Blazers would get Bones Highland, Patty Mills, and a 2022 second-round pick swap, so a 2026 second-round pick swap, which Memphis holds the rights to. And the Clippers would get Robert Williams III, which I think this trade's probably not going to happen anymore. I made this trade a few days ago before they got Drew Eubanks, so you can probably scratch this trade. This trade is not going to happen. Then I made some of these trades for fun. The 76ers and the Suns. The Suns would get Paul George, Reggie Jackson, a 2026 first-round pick, 2 2028 second-round picks, and a 2028 pick swap, along with a 2030 top 10 protected first-round pick. The 76ers would get Kevin Durant in this deal. And this trade is pretty crazy. There's no reports that the Suns and the Sixers are talking. But I do think Kevin Durant has a chance to get traded right now, considering where the Suns are. They're basically deadlocked. They can't trade Bradley Beal because of his no trade clause, and that's basically holding up the entire league, and a lot of the trade deadline is being held up by Bradley Beal. And I think right now they look at it and they say, we're not going to trade Devin Booker. We could trade Kevin Durant right now and still get some value in return. And I think that's something that they might be interested in doing. And in this trade, they'd be getting Paul George and Reggie Jackson, along with 2 first-round picks, a pick swap, and 2 seconds, which wouldn't be a bad return for Kevin Durant. Considering where they are right now, they're deadlocked. If they go out and they trade Kevin Durant, that would open up the Phoenix Suns to maybe go and trade Bradley Beal. Maybe they could trade one of those draft picks they just got with Bradley Beal and have a team that would chew that money and take on the draft picks in return. It'd basically be a salary dump with the heavy draft capital going to the other team, but maybe it would help them get out of this deal a little bit sooner. Maybe they would just blow things up and say, hey, we're not going to win with this big three, and their only option is just basically to blow it up and just completely go backwards and get out of here. And maybe that's something they do. I think the Sixers right now, no, this is Tyrese Maxey's team. And I've thought that for a while now. Heading into the season, I thought this was Tyrese Maxey's team. And if I'm the 76ers, I'm preparing to maybe trade Joel Embiid at some point. I know that sounds crazy, but you can't really rely on him to stay available and healthy. And then you also factor in, he's a younger player, Tyrese Maxey, and is a very good player and a guy that's carried them offensively. You could go out and trade Joel Embiid and get another piece next to him. I don't think that's something that they're going to do, but I think there's a chance they look into it at some point. Another fun trade I made. The Nuggets and the Suns. The Suns would get Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, Darius Saric, Peyton Watson, a 2028 first-round pick swap, a 2030 first-round pick swap, and a 2031 unprotected first-round pick. And the Nuggets would get Kevin Durant. And this trade is not going to happen. This was another trade I just made for fun, just to try to see if I can make the numbers work money-wise, and then also try to make draft capital work. And the Nuggets are in a weird spot right now. They don't really have many draft picks they can trade because you can't trade 2 first-round picks, in consecutive years in a row. So basically, if you have a 2025 and a 2026 and a 2027 first-round pick, you can only trade the 2025 and the 2027 first-round pick, and the 2026 won't have to be a first-round pick swap because you're not allowed to trade a pick in consecutive years without it being a pick swap. Teams cannot trade, 3 draft picks in a row, essentially. You need to basically trade pick swaps in there so a team, essentially have a draft pick coming back in return. Even if it's a lower draft pick, they would get a draft pick in return considering a pick swap. You get basically the lower of those 2 picks basically between the 2 teams. So the Suns right now in this trade would get a decent return for him, but it would be in pick swaps. And I don't think that's something that they're going to do. And at the same time, the Nuggets, as I said, don't have many first-round picks to offer considering right now a lot of their first-round picks they have remaining are around years, are basically sandwiched around years. They already traded their own first-round picks. So basically, mostly that they could trade, most of the things they could trade draft picks-wise would be swaps. Another trade I made for fun was with the Knicks and the Suns. The Suns would get OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, Pacome Dadier, and a 2030 first-round pick swap. And the Knicks would get Kevin Durant. So the Suns would get Dadier, who's a young player, was just drafted in the first round by the Knicks. And then they'd also get Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby in a 2030 first-round pick swap. And the Knicks right now are in a similar spot to the Nuggets. They don't really have many draft picks that they could trade as unprotected first-round picks. So it has to be essentially pick swaps, which won't really mean much to Phoenix when I think the Knicks will be better than what the Phoenix Suns draft picks will be over the next few years. They probably won't be swapping picks with the Phoenix Suns realistically. Considering Phoenix will have a higher draft pick, Phoenix won't really care, to go to a lesser pick. They're going to stay with their own pick if they have it, which they really don't for many draft picks. But in 2030, this would be a pick swap. And then the same goes in that last trade I mentioned, Denver. In reality, who knows? Denver might be the better team at that point. So the Suns wouldn't really be getting much in return with that pick swap. Then another trade I made for fun. San Antonio Spurs and the Phoenix Suns. Keldon Johnson going to the Suns alongside Harrison Barnes, Malachi Branham, Charles Bassey, who's basically just a salary filler in the deal, a 2025 first-round pick, Atlanta's 2027 first-round pick, a 2029 first-round pick swap, and 3 second-round picks. And in return, the Spurs would get Kevin Durant, which would have Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama, and De'Aaron Fox, 3 very, very versatile, dynamic players. De'Aaron Fox, obviously, with his speed and his playmaking ability, and obviously he's become a very good scorer in the NBA. Kevin Durant, very good isolation scorer, one of the best pure offensive players in NBA history. He's my GOAT in my eyes. I think LeBron James is the best player ever, but I think the greatest player, greatest talent, LeBron James is probably the GOAT. But my GOAT, my favorite player of all time is Kevin Durant. I know everybody has a different opinion on who their GOAT is. LeBron James is probably the most successful and the greatest player in NBA history, but I think the best player offensively is Kevin Durant ever. I really do. And even though he's getting up there in age, he's still a very versatile and offensive threat that I think that the Spurs would go out when they could do that. They could do this trade. I think they would like this trade if they had the opportunity to go out and get Kevin Durant. I think they would make this trade if they could. But right now, where they stand, they're 21-26 out of the play-in tournament, the way things stand. But if they think they can make a run in the next 2 years, because KD's still under contract for next season, if they think they can make a run in the next 2 years with Wemby, Fox, Vassell, Sohan, and Durant, it could be worth it. No one would want to play that team in the playoffs, considering how dynamic all of those guys are. I think that would be a very, very good lineup if we could make that happen. We'll see, though. It's not, likely that trade happens, though. I don't think the Spurs are going to go out and make that trade, but they do still have a lot of draft capital they can work with. Just now at this point, not many of their own first-round picks they could trade. A lot of other teams' first-round picks and a lot of second-round picks they could move on from. But we'll see what happens. But I do think that trade to San Antonio would be good for the Spurs. They're still in a spot where they could go out and get guys. Considering they didn't really trade any young players in that trade that they got De'Aaron Fox, they could still go out and add, which is a really interesting spot to be in. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. We'll see how things work out with the NBA trade deadline tomorrow. As I said, today is Wednesday. It is now 3:15 in the afternoon. Tomorrow, Thursday, February 6th, is the NBA trade deadline at 3 p.m. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot going on, I'm sure. There's still some other guys that could get traded. Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, maybe. You can maybe even see Kevin Durant traded. I think LeBron James is a very much of a long shot to get traded. I don't think he's traded, but I do think there's a chance that the Lakers at least look into trading LeBron James. So anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.